All right, so there's this new report that's going around today, and I saw it being covered by several outlets, and there were reactions online, of course, to this, but it talks about new Xbox hardware, which probably sounds strange to a lot of people, considering it feels like the Xbox Series and the PlayStation 5 systems just came out. But based on previous track record with different generations from Microsoft and Sony, it actually wouldn't be too weird to start talking about the potential for revisions here soon. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So first, let's go over where this report's coming from. We can see this over on Pure Xbox, saying Microsoft reportedly working on a smaller, more power-efficient Series X chip. This is based on actually a question that was asked to Brad Sams over on his YouTube channel in a video. They asked about potential revisions for the Xbox Series, and Brad Sams says, I believe this is true. I know that Microsoft was working on revisions of the chip. Now, are we going to see performance improvements? Are we going to see anything else? I do not believe so, but Microsoft is always working on making cooler, more efficient chips because that lowers the cost of production. I believe it is accurate that the Microsoft is working on a smaller, more power-efficient chip. That is, I'm very confident in that, and he should be. I feel like we talked about this a lot, but these companies, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, they're always working on new hardware. Like the R&D division doesn't shut down when their big system launches and then starts back up 3 years or 2 years before the next system has to be ready. They're continuously working on different things because throughout a generation, the chip inside that you may not even notice being changed or replaced or kind of modified, tweaked here and there is constantly undergoing revisions. I mean, if you looked at the PS3, I remember that one was very apparent that there were a lot of changes going on. The Xbox 360, not as much. But the PS3, we'd constantly have, okay, is it an 80 gig with 4 USB ports, 2 USB ports? Is it the 40 gig with 2? Is it the 20 gig that has the backwards compatibility? Is it a slim model that's a 320, a 250? And what came with a lot of this and the different model numbers on the backs were different GPUs and configurations with that cell processor as Sony continued to refine that system as much as possible because when it first came out, it was hot, it was loud, and it pulled a ton of power. So throughout the generation, they continued to make it more and more efficient. Microsoft did the same thing on the other side. When they got to the 360 Slim, they still played around with it, but at that point, they were pretty happy with what they had. Now, when we went to the PS4, we did see obvious changes with the PS4 to the PS4 Slim and the PS4 Pro. And on Microsoft's side, they went from the Xbox One to the One S. And the thing I noticed with those, about 3 years after those systems released originally, the Xbox One and the PS4, to when we got to that Slim model for either one. And the Slim models helped out a lot. I mean, the Xbox One S added functionality with HDR and 4K HD streaming, from what I remember, and an Ultra HD Blu-ray player. But the PS4 Slim helped out in that it was a very quiet and cool running system compared to the original PS4, which would get pretty loud at times. I mean, PS4 Pro was a whole other thing there. But hearing that, I'm like, yeah, you know what? It was 3 years afterwards. In fact, Microsoft announced the Slim model 2.5 years afterwards. And the thing that's really funny about these current systems, and it happens to me a lot, and I noticed many other people, whether it's on different podcasts or videos, we all kind of still refer to the Xbox Series and PlayStation 5 as next generation systems. But they're current gen. They've been out for more than a year. I mean, we're into 2022 now. It's April. These systems released in holiday 2020. So it's been a year and almost 5 months now since they came out. In fact, by the time we get to the end of this year, and it'll be 2 years, I mean, yeah, we would expect Microsoft to start at least maybe referencing plans for a new revision of the Series X, I guess. The Series S is probably where they want it to be when it comes to the cost. They'll do silent revisions with that, with different chips that become cheaper internally for them to create, maybe even shrink the heatsink down along with that chip becoming more power efficient. But it's possible that by the time we get to, actually the next E3, let's say E3 2023 does happen. I mean, based on what they did with the One S, that is when they would announce a revision of some kind to maybe slim down the Series X even. This generation is very different the way that it started off, where it's difficult for these different companies to get these systems in stock and get them out the door, and this is not at all how things started up for the PS4 and the Xbox One. Yes, it was difficult to get those systems at first, but like maybe 6-7 months into that generation, you could walk into a store and just buy one. Like, we see it when you compare the PS5 to the PS4, which we'll find out a bit more about that at the start of May when they put out their fiscal report for the entire year. I have a feeling the PS5 is going to come in quite a bit below what the PS4 was sitting at that time, and it comes down to the chip shortage. Nothing to do with demand. A lot of people want the PS5. So if you're Microsoft and Sony, you would probably just do silent revisions of the chip to be able to create and produce more chips. And of course, that means fix some of the stock issue, but also make more money on the systems. And yeah, actually get a cooler running system. The PS5 could use a revision in terms of making it slimmer. I think most of us can agree on that with how large that system is. But I don't really hear about any heat issues with these systems necessarily. Like, obviously, unless you leave like a massive clog of dust in the back of it, or you set things on top of it, or you put a blanket over it or something. For the most part, it's not a problem. And usually the revisions will work to make more money for the company, yes, have another launch of a system, but also fix some things that they've run into since the release. And then we get into the idea of these systems becoming more powerful through revisions like Pro models. And I almost wonder if just everything that happened last generation with the PS4 and the Xbox One set I don't want to say a bad precedent, but one that's not necessarily required for every generation. I almost wonder if this is a generation where it's not needed, because that was the point where we were transitioning from 1080p up to 4K, and it seemed like Microsoft and Sony realized this was happening during this generation, and they had to get something out for the 4K marketing and at least try to do something with it. But they've launched with systems that I think are more than enough in terms of power, and now it's just up to developers to keep refining and really creating for these next-gen systems, because it's been a lot of cross-gen and a lot of stuff that we look at and say, yeah, it probably could have run on the PS4 and the Xbox One, and yeah, a lot of it does. So that's kind of what I'm thinking here. Look out for probably a revision from Microsoft and definitely Sony to make that PS5 slimmer. Maybe like 2 or 3 years from now. Like, I think this is going to be a longer generation overall because of the slow start and these companies looking to recoup their money towards the back end and maybe try to sit around for Sony way that 100 million to 120 million user mark for a bit longer if they can. But let me know what you guys think about all of this down below. Sure, a revision will eventually happen, I'm sure, for these different systems, but when do you think it'll happen? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.